Yeah, my dear Christian, that's really a premiere for me in a double way. The first one is that my very dear brother living in Canada and Vancouver, we see each other maybe every 2 years, max, maybe every 3 years even. So that we together will have a podcast today. And the other premiere is the English language. We decided to do it in English because you live in an English context, and I think it's maybe more relevant because you have also some messages you want to put here today. And so let's see how it goes. For me, it's very exciting because I'm not so in this daily English routine, but let's see. What we can guarantee is that you will get, dear listener, today the first podcast with the real German accent. So no fake, it's a real German accent, at least.
I have a terrible German accent, I'm told.
Yeah.
And I think I can speak the TH properly in English, but it's probably especially bad at the moment because I visited all my German family and spoke a lot of German, and it gets really difficult at some point. You don't realize anymore. Suddenly you speak English to Germans and the other way around.
Yeah.
And so that is how it is.
Things get mixed up then.
Things get mixed up, and it's sometimes very funny.
Yeah.
Talking at people and they look at me with big eyes, and it's comical.
I had once an experience. I worked as a kind of simultane translator.
Simultaneous, yeah.
Yeah, but just not as a real profession, but it was like there was a workshop and there was an English lecturer, and there was no translator, and so I started translating, and I did this whole day long.
Yeah.
And there was a certain point where I suddenly started to translate a German participant who asked something in German. I translated his German into German. It was very funny. I realized that I was just repeating what he was saying. It's very funny.
Oh, that's very funny. Yeah, the brain is remarkable. Yeah. What it can do and how it happens is amazing.
Christian, you need some tea? You would like some herbal tea?
Yeah,
you can
sure.
Put in some
herbal tea.
So this is the double premiere today, and Christian, you're living in Canada since really a long time now. I would say 20 years.
Yeah, I left my beloved Starnberg and home country behind, and feel a little bit still like a traitor and with a heavy heart. I have so many friends here, and yes, I first lived in London for 2.5 years, and then in 1997 we properly moved to 1997, yeah.
So it's 25 years
so I'm getting trouble with the numbers now with the German. 79 and 97. 1997, so we decided to move to Canada, where my wife Lena was already established with her family, was there. And then we thought it's just simpler, and I like the place. That's how we met. We met there, and I was traveling in 92, 93.
Yeah.
Did some beautiful nature trips, and that's how I met my wife. Then
very nice.
It was very mysterious, everything very interesting. And then I moved back to Germany.
Finished your studies?
She was on the way I was already had my degree in architecture.
Yeah.
And my wife wanted to go to work as an investment banker in London, and I went back to Germany, and then we basically kind of jetted back and forth, and finally we decided to get engaged and got married, and we lived in London then for 2.5 years, because for her it was a bit difficult in Germany. All the investment bankers go to London, so it wasn't a point for her to go to Munich.
Yeah.
And then finally we decided, with the second child on the way, we decided to move to Vancouver because I liked Vancouver. I knew Vancouver. I spent half a year there, and and that was great. And that then we ended up in Vancouver, moved to 97, and since then I'm coming here to Germany every couple of years. I'm trying to come
2 to 3 years,
Yes.
somehow, something like that. Yeah, I mean, Vancouver is a beautiful place. I absolutely agree with you. But let's stay, because we are here at the moment in Bavaria. First, let's stay here, because you just mentioned already Bavaria is like, or Starnberg or whatever is like your beloved country, what you left, and I experienced you like that also. So every time if you're here, you are like in a different state. You're really a different person then, yeah.
It's possible.
And it's like you are so happy. And tell me a little bit about what does it mean to you?
Well, it is very weird, right? You know, when we were little children. I don't know how you had this experience, but I was always told I'm the Saupreis, because we spoke High German. Or literate German at home, and we didn't speak dialect, and so you were trained not to use a dialect. And so, however, now I seem to have overcome that.
Yeah.
And with my love for the dialect, and for a lot of Bavarian friends I have who spoke heavy dialect, and suddenly yesterday in Passau, I was sitting with a Weissbier, and my wife and my daughter had gone to bed already. I sat there in the restaurant because the owner said to me, I have to have this Weissbier, which is delicious. And I think Turmweisse or something. And anyway, and there was a couple sitting on the other, and they said, that Weissbier is good. And I started talking really Bavarian, wonderful, down-to-earth Bavarian dialect. And it was so refreshing, and they accepted it. Yeah. I wasn't called Saupreis, which is nice.
That's true, yeah.
And it's somehow so deep rooted in us, right?
Yeah, I know this experience. I think this talking the dialect, it's only cool if it comes spontaneously. If you try to speak it, it's somehow they immediately sense that you're trying, that you're pretending. And I also make this experience, especially. For example, if I go to a bakery shop or something like that, and there's a Bavarian-speaking person serving, and then I very spontaneously start speaking a little bit Bavarian. Or I had this very similar experience when once I was very drunk on a party or so, and then I was so drunk that I really absolutely spoke Bavarian on a certain point.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So there it comes out because these blockages which you get from school are removed, right?
Yeah.
And it was difficult. We were in this kind of little schizophrenic situation that we were surrounded by Bavarians, but we didn't speak it at home. But of course, you wanted to be part of the whole thing. And I have to tell, I had very, very crazy friends.
Yeah.
So we were kind of a little legendary here in Starnberg, and so some of my best friends are legends, and me too, I guess, somehow. I get a big welcome when I come here. We have a beautiful group of about 40 friends, I would say, which is very closely knit, and is still sticking together, the core. And this is amazing. So I have kind of a second family in that here.
I experienced that. It's really a big happening if you're coming. You know, it's like, they call you very, very lovingly the Shimi. You're the Shimi. And they say, the Shimi kommt. And then they bring beer, and they even make a tent for you, and then you sit there and drink beer and have fun all together. Things like that happen.
Yeah, friends of mine started a brewery even here just because they wanted their own beer. So that's what was going on. We did legendary parties in Starnberg. I remember one party where the police came all the time and took the generators away. We were in a hilly area outside of Starnberg with trees around. We thought we would be okay, but somehow it created like a super bowl of radiating the sound towards the old people's home and the hospital. And then the police took the generator, first the fuel away, then the generators, and then the first shift came and partied with us. I remember the best funny scene was the truck driver came with a big semi. Semi is that's the English where you have the front engine and then the big long truck. And we had ordered 2,000 liters, and he came with 4,000 liters, a semi. And then the driver gave us the key, gave the key to a friend of mine, Ronnie. He managed it, and said, boys, you can drink 4,000. Maybe it's 4,000, but we'll see how much you can drink. And tomorrow we do then the accounting. And gave us the key, and that was it. And then we had this 4,000 liters in wooden kegs with cooling aggregate running, everything on battery, and then we had a schnapps tent, and it was wild. I think it was, we don't know, between 250 and 400 people maybe there at the time. And I remember down in the morning after all the generators were gone and the police had come with the hats, and poor Filipano, whose land it was, everybody will help you with the fine. Of course, nobody helped. Yeah. He was left alone with the fine, the poor man. Yeah. And I remember people dancing, and I think my father had a BMW, and we hooked up the loudspeakers to the battery of my father's car. And my poor father, that's what happened to
Empty
the car.
Battery then.
People dancing, or there was a stage, and in the mud, some left people, the sun came up. Parties like that we had.
Yeah.
We did rock in the beer tent, where we had a beer tent, I think, for 2,300 people with ox roasting, specialized ox roasting, and we invited all the craziest punk bands from Germany and Switzerland. And my friends had a punk band called A&P, Attraktiv und Preiswert.
Yeah,
that was
I remember.
the no-name label of the supermarket chain here. Yeah. And had some scandals, and then a band came from Switzerland called Rotten Youth. And then I don't remember if the Toten Hosen was also playing, but there were some German bands, and it was very disciplined. The local fire brigade was telling the mayor to shut up, and they were all our friends, voluntary fire brigade, and it was very disciplined, wonderful party.
Yeah.
Legendary. I mean, we went into debt, right? It was very risky, and it was full. And
so it worked.
Oh, and everybody was happy, and everything was cleaned up afterwards, but it was legendary. Who does that? Rock in the beer tent,
Yeah. Yeah, great. And if you now today look at that whole thing, and especially look at this coming home kind of thing, although I guess you're also at home now in Vancouver because you're so long there and all your family is there and so on. But this kind of coming home, what would you say is the most important aspects of this country here for you now? What is it standing for you? What stands for you?
When I come here?
Yeah. Today.
Oh, I don't know. I can. This is hard to describe. It's a certain vibe. It's the beauty of the country. The country is very beautiful with the old buildings, and like Lake Starnberg, just you go there and you forget how beautiful it is because you grow up and you get used to it, and then you come from another place and you come here and you see this nature combined with tamed nature or kind of shaped nature and houses, and you can see that the soul of the country goes to the people who make the art and translates into the figures and shapes and paintings and Lüftelmalerei, these paintings on the walls, and all that is interesting, and it I guess it wakens childhood memories where you felt comfortable. And that is very beautiful.
Yeah. I get this picture. It is a kind of there is some love going into the environment. Yeah. People are really lovingly somehow taking care and gestalten. I don't know the English.
They shape
it.
But what is interesting, the people are extremely spiritual here.
Yeah.
And even people who say that they are left the church or whatever, there is a very strong, what the First Nations would call in America, spirit. Very, very strong here and alive here. And I think you feel that. And it's the home, right? I mean, it is a place in the world where I think something will come from here because there is so much spirit and soul in this country. So I have hopes that something good is going to come. And I see the young people, they're going back to traditions, but they're very open. we had the terrible war. We all know we don't want war anymore, and somehow I have a feeling maybe something will come from here.
Okay.
So.
Okay, let's come back to that if we later talk about your experience with the First Nations, what you already mentioned. But let's first keep track on you as a person. So you just talked about shaping the environment by gardening, by building houses, by tame the nature, as you said. And so yourself, you are an architect.
Yes.
So let's go into the here and now and look at what is it about being an architect in Vancouver today in the year 2021?
It's an interesting situation. In Vancouver, generally for an architect, to be an individual architect for single-family homes or like people are here, this is almost not happening because anybody almost can be an architect, can design a single-family home. So it's a very competitive market, and there are designers in it.
Because you don't have to be an architect.
No, you don't.
You can
have
be
to
a kind of a designer. You're just a designer, and you do.
I can take a napkin and sit down in a coffee shop and design something on a napkin as long as it's to the regulations. I think now maybe these days the city will say, why don't you hire somebody who can draw that better? But theoretically, yes, you don't need one. They start introducing a bit more that you need now, or you should have some qualifications or some training. So the market is then for the architects more in the larger projects, and it's very competitive to start a new firm is very difficult. Yeah. It's more difficult than here, and mostly what happens is you become a partner in a firm, and then you take on that old name with the firm, and the older people retire, and that's how it works. Yeah. And now what is challenging for us is we have a terrible homeless and drug problem in Vancouver, even though it's one of the richest and most livable places in the world. We have a very shameful, unfortunate situation where a lot of people, I think, who get lost elsewhere in the country, they come to Vancouver because it's warm. And so we have a place in downtown, which is called the Downtown East Side, where there are a lot of desperate people there who unfortunately are dealing with drug problems. And so that is one interesting situation in Vancouver. The other situation is that we need more density in the city, but on the other hand, we don't want to change the character too much. And so there is a struggle between more denser projects and high-rise and very high-quality living areas where people can't afford anymore to live. So same situation as in Hamburg or Munich, where living space is very expensive, comparably expensive. But the city now also wants to be one of the cleanest cities in the world. Very high goals were set, in my opinion, a little bit too ambitious for the situation which was there. And so we are switching to passive house design. So we're looking a lot at what Germany is doing. Yeah. And so, which strengthens my position as well, because I'm in that. So currently, we do in our office the largest private funded project in North America, which is coming close. I think it's over $2 billion now.
Wow. Okay.
Several towers and a huge refurbished or redesigned shopping center. Yeah. So there's going to be rental and condominiums, which are basically Eigentumswohnungen in German.
Yeah. So, but this will be done in a very like passive kind of or very energy.
That one is not passive house, but it's also very low energy. And my project currently, I'm doing a school with social housing on top on a beautiful lot because it belongs to the city, but it's actually a fantastic lot at the yacht harbor at the water, probably one of the last lots available like that. And there was no money there for a long time. Now the money is there, and there's a community center right next to it, and we're building a passive house, which is this Passivhaus in German, but there's almost a zero energy balance. And it's extremely challenging because the way we designed it is a very challenging design. And I love these things. So I love working on these challenging things. So.
Yeah. And Vancouver was for a long time one of the most interesting places for architects.
It is a very interesting place because it's one of the fastest growing cities in the Western world. I think half of the cranes of the world, one for a while, were in Vancouver or something like that. Yeah. Or maybe I'm saying something wrong, but it was a huge number. Yeah. Vancouver is growing very, very fast. And now it has slowed down a little bit because of COVID as well. I think the market might be, some say it's overheated. I'm not sure. In Vancouver, people always said that, and then it didn't.
It never crashed.
It never. There was a crisis in the 1980s because of the interest rates went very high. But since then, it's quite stable. At least on the not on the market for office buildings, but for residential. It is a very stable market. Yeah.
So, and Christian, I remember once a story that you had at least an interview in London at Norman Foster. And
I actually worked there.
Yeah, you even worked there
for 3 months.
Yeah, and I remember I want to make the point. I remember that you somehow impressed these guys in the interview because you had a very clear understanding of the philosophy of what are they pursuing. And my question now is, you can also tell the story about Norman Foster, but my question is, what is your focus in architecture? You personal, you Christian, what is for you the philosophy of architecture today?
To be honest, I can't tell you. I just try to do the task ahead. I mean, what I would love to do is I would love to help the whole situation of humankind. So for me, architecture it has to be very important that it's livable. Yeah, I find that we do sometimes modern kind of architecture and then kind of more almost brutalist or very simple architecture, and forget that and forget to ask what the people really like. Then on the other hand, when we ask the people what they like, it can get very strange as well. So we have to be a guiding hand, but we have to work together with the people. And what I really like in the office where I'm working now, and that is kind of going in the direction which I feel comfortable with, is we do social housing. Yeah. And we see the situation of desperate people, and we're trying to create living space for them in a way that we bring them together with the developers, and we say to developers, we have a chance here to help. Let's integrate a social housing component into the project, which is very unusual. So we do, which I don't think in England that would not be very popular to do, but we were brave. We had a very brave developer, and we did this Woodwards project, and we had these high-end condos or Eigentumswohnung, or where people own the apartment, the flat or apartment, and combined with the social housing, even with social housing which is called single-room occupancy, where people live who are struggling and recovering from drug problems and so on, and they are under supervision living there. And it was all in one complex, and it was so successful that the city now integrated that into this zoning bylaw, which is zoning is basically like Flächennutzungsplan or Bebauungsplan. It's a little bit different. It's a bit something in between the two. Yeah. That was our office created that basically, and so I was part of that. I remember I was in a social housing. I was finishing off a social housing complex, deficiencies, and go through see whether everything is painted correctly and so on. And people were moving in, and then we were in this big elevator, and then one of the guides helped them move in these people that was in the single room occupancy for the difficult cases, recovering people. And that's the architect, they said. And I was standing in the elevator with them, with the other 10 people or so. And then suddenly he said, oh, it's beautiful. And they got a group hug in the elevator. And that paid for a lot of the overtime.
Yeah.
You know, it's something I will never forget.
So they were so happy, so touched at that moment.
They were happy. And when you saw this whole project coming together, there were people sitting in the park. There's a park, and you can look at the construction site, and there were people sitting and heard them talking. And said, that's what they built for us, you know. That's for us. And so on. They were pointing at it, and they were, you know, it was very touching. And so I know that we have created something good, and I'm part of that, and I'm giving my energy to that. And I don't see it, like architecture is very ego-driven, but this team we have is different, and I like it because we really work together. And I don't need my ego anymore. There's a phase where your ego and I've given this kind of up, and I now see myself more as a teacher to the younger ones and tell them how things get done and so.
So how did that come that you don't need this ego anymore? What happened?
This is a long story.
I know.
You want to get into this? How did that happen? I don't know. I think. If you have the ego is an interesting thing, and we have to tell the audience, I guess, that you and we are in contact, and every 2 weeks, I would say at least, or even more often, we call each other and talk and about our experiences and our journey in life. And I have to say, this is wonderful that we can do this.
Yeah,
and. How did it get there? I guess we have to start then earlier in life, no?
Okay. Let's start.
Okay. How did it get there? So I would say I was a bit of an unusual child compared, and I guess you as well, and maybe we were unusual. I wanted to know why things are the way they are the whole time, and I was going on the nerves of a lot of teachers and people and so on, because
even parents.
I was drilling. I was saying, okay, why is the world here? What was before the Big Bang or things like that, right? So I started reading stuff, so whatever I could get, and I remember Kinder des Weltalls was a book back out there.
By.
I don't know anymore.
So Children of the Cosmos or Children.
Then there was Professor Heinz Haber, who was on TV and had the science show, and I loved him. Very nice professor, and taught very well, explained very well. So I was just riveted to this kind of stuff. And that was, of course, way before the internet age. We had 3 channels.
Yeah.
And sometimes you were lucky and Professor Heinz Haber was on. And then we had Heinz Sielmann with the animals who was like the German David Attenborough, right?
Yeah.
And so I was interested in cosmology. Why? Because that was the big unknown. I was interested in the deep sea, and Jacques Cousteau was one of my heroes.
I remember the books in your room,
That was the other unknown, because I thought when you look at the unknown, it is untouched, and you can maybe see, maybe in my heart or my soul, I thought you can figure out the what is behind everything, because you see something which nobody else has seen, so that it doesn't have a pretext or any cultural overlay over it. That's there, and in space, there's this crazy stuff you see in space and all kinds of shapes, and now with the Hubble telescope we see this, birthplace of stars and these clouds it shapes, and you just look at it. Yeah. It's amazing. And so I started with that, and I always ask the question: why are we here, and why what is life about? And then I became trained more in the scientific thinking, the way we're supposed to think, the Newtonische world, and then later at school you get into physics, and later also into nuclear physics, and I did my main course in chemistry, very difficult course. Later the teacher told other pupils to not choose it because it was so much work for him.
Yeah.
And that brought me into a very, very kind of left brain field. And but it was not totally satisfying because it couldn't explain the big questions. And I was always looking for the big questions. And so suddenly I got attracted into, I discovered Erich von Däniken, for instance. Okay, we all know him, and who has the idea that there was some older civilizations and maybe even extraterrestrials which were the gods.
Yeah.
And that's a very interesting, of course, fascinating field. I started reading Carlos Castaneda's, which you have read as well, which was the first time I got into this world of the inner cosmos with Carlos Castaneda's and all this, what can happen. And of course, science fiction and fantasy books and so on. So I tried to get something of this feeling of there is something greater in Tolkien. And,
there's also like kind of a deeper meaning in all that.
Yes, there's a deeper meaning in all that. And then so what was very interesting, our mother, she was getting old. Yeah. And I remember once there was some crisis and I had to come to Germany, and I had this new laptop. And so there was a lot of waiting and sitting, and I looked in the internet, and suddenly this whole internet opened up, and YouTube and
all these things started at that time.
And they started, and I suddenly had time on my hands, and I started researching, and it was very interesting. I came across, so this is a long winded road where we get there, but it's interesting. There are different places where people get to it. And I suddenly discovered, obviously, that the physics is not quite what we are taught at school. And it seems like there are fields in physics opening up now, which where you question what was first, the thought or the matter.
Yeah.
And before I got there, I first saw that there are people who claim that we could solve the energy problem by tapping into a field called the 0 point or vacuum energy.
Yeah.
And this is basically that structure of space itself contains energy. And that was a guy called Casimir. He was a physicist. I don't know if he passed away probably in the 50s. And he said, if you polish two metal plates really, really to atomic level and bring them together, then the energy in space of the space, if it exists, because by quantum mechanics it tells us that it does exist, this would press the two plates together and you could measure it. And I think that was successfully done in the 90s. I think in the second half of the 90s they did that. And proved this energy is existing, and they proved that they could calculate it, but very roughly, and so they're still estimating. And I think the most conservative is that 1 cube of a centimeter could run the Earth 80,000 years at current energy level, and the other end of the spectrum, the least conservative, is that you could create a new universe with the energy in that little cube.
Okay.
Yes. And it could be a centimeter cube, or I think some say an inch, which is 2.5 centimeters, so at least either one of them.
And this idea fascinated you a lot.
That fascinated me because I tell you why. Because in all my thinking, I'm just sick and tired of war. I see war around us, people killing each other instead of having a good time.
Because of energy. they're looking for energy, like for oil or gas or...
Okay, yeah, it is basically, it's a long thought process. I thought, okay, why do we have all these wars? Why is poverty around there and so on? And I was thinking, what can I do? Suddenly it came over me and I said, okay, we have this beautiful world.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful planet we are on, right? I love it. I don't know if somebody doesn't love it, but I love it. And I was thinking, why do we do all these things, and what can we do? What is the least effort with the most effect we can do to turn it around? Because we are destroying the planet, and I guess a lot of people are aware of it, that it seems like we come into a point where it really becomes visible and critical and an impact, and we become, the Earth has a buffer, but I don't know how deep we are already eating into the buffer. It's not clear. So I said, okay, how can we stop all these wars? Because when people have poverty and war and all that, that is when you cannot focus on anything else. You just try to focus on survival and everything. And you
That's
can't,
true. That's the Maslow pyramid, that you first need to be fed, you need food, you need safety, you need social contacts, and then you can start taking care for other things.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so my thinking was, because I'm a lazy guy in some ways, right? I don't like to spin my wheels. Yeah. I'm not lazy. I like thinking complexly. I like to do complex things, to tackle them, but I don't like to spin my wheels. I like to first look and analyze. I think I'm a good analyzer. I can zoom out and I can see a picture of stuff which other people don't see.
Interconnections.
How it connects. Yeah. And so I like to analyze a long time, and then because then you put so much energy once you go in one direction. And so I thought, what is this thing where we can have the most leverage? And I came to the conclusion it's energy.
Yeah.
Because energy is contained in everything, and a lot of wars are about energy and resources and gold. Some are on mining and resources, but in the end, it's also a lot of it's related to energy again.
Yeah.
So when you look at our world and you really calculate how much money is in the whole economy, and you will find the largest lion portion is actually energy, because for transport of goods, for transporting our food, to make fertilizer, everything needs energy. We heat houses, to make concrete, to make steel. Huge amounts of energy is everywhere in there. Then we have, of course, interest rates, and when you build that also into the energy costs, and it's staggering how much of our economy is actually the energy.
Yeah.
So, and then when I came across this 0 point energy, suddenly, oh, this is interesting. And then, of course, it intrigued me because it was off the beaten path. It was, you read about, this is woo-woo, and this is bad science, and it can't be, and it contradicts the laws of physics.
Yeah.
And however, this energy was proven. So now we start saying, okay, if they could prove the Casimir effect, and you see people claiming that they have machines running and they can't file patents because it's a perpetuum mobile, and that means a self-running machine, and we know that energy dissipates and you lose, and it gets turned into friction and heat, and so the machine has to stop at some point. It cannot run. So when people come to the patent office with something like that, they can't right away. They get like, okay, there's the door, please. Don't waste our time. But when you suddenly think, okay, maybe some of these people manage to tap into this 0 point energy field, which some scientists call quantum flux or universal flux, it's called, then you have to start taking this more seriously. And so I started looking into that, and there are a lot of YouTube videos and so on. And then one of the breakthrough things was a guy called Stan Meyer. I think it's important because people see it always very specialized, and I'm trying to bring this into a greater context. And Stan Meyer, for instance, was a guy who worked, an American from Texas, very religious, but he worked for the, I think he was an advisor to the government about nuclear power plants, and he became wealthy he had an invention on a drill piece for oil drilling. And what Stan Meyer did then, you heard about him. There is this guy from Texas who builds a car which runs on water in the garage. So
when was that? How long was that ago?
Excuse me. That was in the early 90s.
Okay. So 25 years ago.
80s, early 90s.
Years. Okay.
Yeah, 80s, early 90s. And so you hear that in the media. Okay, you hear this and forget it.
So it was really in the newspapers or in the radio shows?
in some TV stations. They did a show about it.
But it could be like a big hoax.
It could be a big
story.
Okay. You hear this guy from Texas builds in a garage a car which runs on water, and you dismiss it.
You think about it. Okay.
And then we had this period where I came here, and because of our mother wasn't feeling well. And I sat there and I had the time, and I come across Stan Meyer talking. He talked about Jesus and how this idea came to him, and he had to and he had to do it. And he was like, he got a mandate. And then I thought, interesting.
So a religious, crazy
religious fanatic, Bible Belt religious fanatic.
Don't listen to him in the first sight.
But fascinating.
So
I continued listening because I thought I have to listen to the crazy American, and I heard Stan Meyer was this. And then suddenly his tone changed, and he went into patent law. And then he lectured about 20 minutes about international patent law, and I suddenly realized the man knows something. This is not an idiot. That is a very intelligent man. And then I looked up about him, and I found out the background. And then suddenly you learn, why is he operating in a garage? Well, because by Texas law, in a garage you can do what you want.
Okay, so you could even build a nuke there, if you like?
I think with a nuke, maybe not. But other than that, you can do what you want. That is your house, and your house is sacred.
Yeah.
So the reason is, he knew that. That's why he talked to lawyers at the beginning, that when he starts what he's doing, he gets under massive attack.
Yeah.
And so they would consider what he was doing as nuclear physics, and he has a nuclear physics lab and all that, and then he is into $200 million just for all the safety precautions and all that stuff you need. And that is why he's building in the garage. And suddenly that made sense. When you hear this in the media, you think, but now it made sense. And now I got interested. And then he starts a lecture in a small audience, and he says that what he does is, his main invention was, he had I think it was he split water, okay? Like normal electrophoresis, I think it's called, to split water into oxygen and hydrogen. Like water is made from 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen, H2O, and he split it. Now, conventionally, you need very high levels
energy
of electricity, amp, which measures the amount of electricity in amps, very high amps, and it's an energy wasting process, and you lose to heat and so on.
This is the discussion today about hydrogen, that the production is very high energy consuming.
Exactly, exactly, and that is a problem with the whole hydrogen idea, is how do you split the water without. However, Stan Meyer had several inventions. One of his inventions, he had a catalytic element, which for the cathode, I think it was, or anode or cathode. Okay, don't get me wrong. I think it was the cathode. Which was a alloy of I think some stainless steel and I think platinum. And it was but maybe I'm wrong. I think it was platinum. It was a special mixture. And that created an enormous efficiency in the reaction. So that was number one. The big invention was that Stan Meyer thought, okay, I'm trying to break up the bond in this molecule. What I do is I put, I don't need the amps, I don't need a lot of electricity, I need extremely high negative and positive potential.
So voltage.
Yeah. So he says, if I keep the amp low, but I hike up the voltage like crazy, what happens? Because he calculated it should rip the molecule apart.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. He created a very, very beautiful, it became more and more beautiful and smaller device, how he can amp. I think he ramped it up to, I think it's crazy, like 20 million or 100 million volts, I don't remember, 120 million volts, huge, but with only like 0.25 amp, something like that. And he was able to rip the molecule apart, and he tells it in a lecture. He talks about the orbitals of the electrons and what happens and so on. And I saw the same lecture I saw him giving in I think it was in Basel or Bern, in Switzerland, in front of scientists and physicists. And then he asked him, what do you think is happening here? And he says, well, it's very simple. If we rip this apart, the electrons, the whole system gets disturbed, and we take so much energy out that the electrons will collapse into the core. Mm-hmm. But that is not allowed in nature. And he thinks that the 0-point energy field is what keeps the electrons circling around the core in the right orbital. And so he says there's some sluice gate that basically like a gate or like a vent opens up and lets this energy out, and that stabilizes the core, and that is how he indirectly pulls the energy out of the vacuum. So he might have found it. And then the third dimension was he said we leave the oxygen and the hydrogen together in the pipe, and then he used it was a Volkswagen engine in a dune buggy. Yeah. And then together with his brother in his garage, he developed a very sophisticated injection pump working with a conventional motor. And he left the oxygen and the hydrogen together in the pipe because he thought it's the safest. And that was the fourth invention. He developed a nozzle where you can inject into the carburetor without the flame being able to go back in. But since he produces very small amounts directly, he doesn't have a big tank or whatever. He has a water tank. Yeah. And the energy from the Lichtmaschine, in Germany, the Lichtmaschine, from the generator of the motor, which normally charges the battery, was enough to split the water. Yeah. So you look at that and your eyes pop out. And you wonder, is this all fake? And I don't know.
What always comes up, this question, it sounds so good, it sounds even too good to be true, yeah?
It sounds too good to be true.
And then there are questions like, for example, maybe why the one question was why it wouldn't be pursued anymore by others if you, for example, talked in front of scientists, why nobody picked up this idea and thought, okay, let's go on with that. And there very soon comes this idea of there is maybe a kind of of interests, powerful people having different interests, want to earn money with the oil industry or whatever could be in there. But if I look on the other side, for example, there is the idea of cold fusion.
Yes.
And cold fusion would be also absolutely a fantastic technology.
Yes.
It would solve
all
the energy problems on this planet. Yeah. And there is nobody oppressing it. It's just people try to find ways there.
It doesn't get much support,
yeah,
right?
Okay, that's true.
It got ridiculed for a long time, and apparently some of the people ridiculing it at MIT was falsifying data, which is coming out now.
Okay.
So I followed that as well, and this was beautifully put together in a book by one of the astronauts for the Apollo program.
Okay.
Brian O'Leary, who is also a physicist and an astrophysicist. And he worked together with Carl Sagan on many satellite missions later in life. He never flew to the moon. He was one of those missions which were stranded, like Apollo 18 or so. He was supposed to go,
stopped it,
and it didn't happen. Yeah. And he came across the same thing. I don't exactly understand the story. I don't know the story in detail anymore. Yeah. But that kind of confirmed back to me that there is something to it, because he devoted a large part of his life to it and lost academic
reputation and everything. He lost
and
it.
in the end, he ended up in Ecuador. He had to move to Ecuador and to live in peace. And then he lived in a little some plantation valley and in the end, and then he got a very strange cancer. But this is now conspiracy theory stuff. We don't know whether that's related or not.
Okay, but what's the content? What is the
Well, what is interesting, I found in my research 5 technologies. One of them was Stan Meyer. One of them was the Rossi with the cold fusion, which to me seemed to be promising, where I thought this is not fake, there could be something to it. One of them was, for instance, Paul Newman. There was a guy, it's not the actor Paul Newman, but there was a guy, Paul Newman, who later got offered money for it, and then he was very paranoid inventor, and he took it to his grave, unfortunately. There was a guy who had a box which worked, and I think he wanted to give it to the city of Chicago. I don't remember anymore. So there were a few people I came across, and it's now, I have to go back and research it again.
Just one little thing in between, because this moving to Ecuador and so on, I just want I was reminded on one story that is, let's say, generally acknowledged. That's David Bohm. And he, for example, was an absolute genius guy. He Albert Einstein was a good friend of him and thought he's really an important and genius person. But he had to move out of the United States because of political issues. I think he made a mistake that when he was a young guy, for I think 3 months he joined to the Communist Party. Because he thought he would find people who would read with him together Hegel and philosophical books. And he found out nobody's reading philosophical books there. Then he stepped out again. And this was already enough to destroy his whole career. So it's not just a conspiracy thing. It's a reality that scientific careers can be destroyed by very small little incidents.
You see, with the 0-point energy, I think the problem is that if you really have a device which is the size of a box like that, where you can pull out almost endless energies out of the vacuum of space, you can power any device, and you can't, like also when it's used in war, you cannot, for a tank, power a tank, you can't cut the supply lines because it has its own energy source. But you can... There are rumors that you could overload it, and then you could create something like a hydrogen bomb,
or a black hole, or whatever.
So I
or
think,
a wormhole, or something crazy.
And I think that Nikola Tesla was going in that direction, and I think, and I don't know, we don't have time probably to get into that, and there's a lot written about it, but I think he was going in that direction, and Westinghouse and J.P. Morgan, they probably had a secret conference with other scientists, and they said, okay, that was in 1905 or 1907, we have now a way to meter people, and we're going to make a lot of money, and we get electricity to everybody, we have something for humankind. And Tesla now wants to do something else. He wants to now transmit energy through air and go into tap into electrical field of the Earth, which in some ways again is probably tapping also into the quantum of this quantum universal flux. And so they kind of, I think what they did is they said we can't have that happen. We need order now and move forward. And they said then they went to the military and the government and said, look, this is all weaponizable. You have to control this. And that's my theory from my research, my hypothesis that that could be one of the things where it was decided to shut things down. And since then, a lot of these patents get taken off the market. We know, it was a few years ago, I knew the number was at 5,400 patents are taken off the market and
What
locked
does
away.
it mean taken off the market?
They're considered weaponizable.
Okay.
Or for military use.
So there is
and
in the United States, they have the
away.
right to take out things that are somehow potentially dangerous.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And just maybe let's try to get back, because we are now jumping from point to point. Just get back to this guy, this astronaut.
Brian O'Leary.
Brian O'Leary and his book, because it sounded very interesting.
Yeah, so Brian O'Leary, I forgot the title now, but he wrote a book about the 0-point energy devices, where he identified the 5 devices which I thought would be, they seem to be real. Yeah. And I thought, oh my God, I could have saved so much time by just reading that book. But I came through my own to it, so it's always better and more interesting. And then and that confirmed to me that there is somebody who is in physics, and we said that already, and that's what I found very, very interesting. And that now everybody will ask now, okay, now I'm talking so long about this, why? What has that to do with the earlier question, the original question we had, with what has that to do with the world and the spirit and all that? And I suddenly had an epiphany at that point. I think it was triggered by research done by I've heard about Edgar Mitchell, who was Apollo 14, one of the astronauts, where they had the car driving around
at the moon,
and on the moon, and he started a center for consciousness research. And then I realized that there were other people who thought that consciousness is possibly also by quantum physics is there first, and consciousness creates matter or even controls matter and all that, and like David Bohm and all that stuff. And so I started listening to lectures about consciousness, and there were these ideas that consciousness is not in our head, that it's outside. I started listening to near-death experiences. I listened to many hours of people telling their near-death experiences and so on. And I listened. That was another eye-opener, which was Halton Arp, who is an astronomer. Yeah. And he has incredible. He thinks that quasars, which are these very high energy objects, and they are very, very redshifted. And now it becomes a bit scientific. We think the universe is expanding because we see a redshift. There's a standard level of brightness in the stars. There's a constant, and when we see other galaxies redshifted, we think that they are moving away from us. That is the so-called Doppler effect, where the light wave gets stretched because of the speed. And Einstein visited Hubble, and Hubble has discovered this redshift, and then they were thinking about and talking, and then Hubble thought maybe it is the Doppler effect, and we have an expanding universe. However, Hubble was not 100% sure about it, and Halton Arp was his right-hand man. Yeah. And later Halton Arp thought that when you look at these quasars, which are very redshifted, so they think they are giant black holes from the primeval time of the universe, 9 billion years ago, 8 billion years ago, and later became maybe core of galaxies or whatever, but they were eating and they were alive, and that's we see them, this super high energy.
They were eating stars.
Eating whole systems of stars and whatever, and that was at the beginning, and have this unbelievable energy blast coming out, and that's why they're still so energetic, even so they're so far away redshifted. But Halton Arp said that when you look at the X-ray pictures or X-ray telescopes and so on, you can see filaments between the quasars and galaxies, and people always say, because they happen often behind galaxies, and people say they are behind the galaxy. But he says maybe they're part or they came out from the galaxy because I can see structures connecting them. And there are some people supporting him. And Halton Arp always said we have to look at the plasma in the space. And the reason why I go there is just because what Halton Arp discovered, he thinks that cores of galaxies, they spit out other galaxies, spit out a quasar, and the quasar becomes the core of a new galaxy, and it's redshifted because of it has to do with gravity and light escaping, and it has to do maybe with processes happening, primeval processes of forming of matter inside, which we haven't understood yet, which create a redshift. And Halton Arp was so attacked, and in the end, he was not allowed to use a telescope anymore. He was one of the foremost astronomers in the United States, and then he couldn't use a telescope anymore. And he passed away, I think, 2 years ago, or 1 year ago. And it's a very sad story, but fantastic lectures. So when you now see this, and then I saw a Max Planck picture of deep space generated in a computer, and when you look at it, it looks like a brain. And there is a movie where this is also explained, and there is a German actor, Maximilian Schell, who is narrating the movie in German. Okay.
A fantastic film.
Do you remember the name of the title of the movie?
I don't remember the title anymore, but you know what? We look it up and we put it,
and we put it at
the bottom. That's a wonderful film. If people want to get into that, where that whole thing is explained in the picture, also some of the ideas I tell here come together there in that film, and consciousness. And you see the universe looks like a microscopic electron raster microscope picture of brain cells, with neurons connecting. So the galaxies look like they're filaments reaching out to other. So then I suddenly had this crazy idea and thought, what is if Halton Arp is right? Maybe he's not right. But it was just, it triggered, at least the idea triggered this epiphany. Yeah. And the universe is not growing because of a big bang, but it's growing because there is a core coming out of the galactic core, and it's forming a new galactic core. So there's like a splitting of cells, and it grows. And there's also theories that the Earth might grow, and that is very controversial at the moment, but I don't know where it goes in the end. And maybe that planets like Jupiter ignites into a sun, and that's why we see so many solar systems. They have, instead of one sun, they have 2 or 3 or suns. One sun is unusual. So maybe
one sun is unusual.
Really? It's unusual.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Most systems are 2 or 3.
Oh, really?
The rare,
and they're circling around them,
around each other,
and the planets are around the core of 3 suns, or are they in between somehow? You don't know.
All kinds. Okay. There are stars which are close together, and very chaotic circling. There are stars which are so far away. Yeah. Some people say we might be a twin star system, but our other stars are so far away that we haven't realized it yet.
Okay.
So it could be light years away, and they come together and then come out, and you can look in the internet, beautiful simulation of how these stars circle, and then when you throw planets in, it becomes very, very difficult and complicated. And like you say, the question is, maybe there are some planets who go through one sun and then get caught by the other sun and change. It gets unbelievably complicated, and I think they are unstable. At least you cannot predict these systems. They are unpredictable systems.
So, but this means again, but just sorry for this interruption, but this means that having one sun maybe is a big advantage for developing life, because you have a stability. Yeah. There's this one circle, you don't have very complicated curves that change change radically the climate and the heat and so on.
Okay. But binary stars work as well because they're stable. Okay. It becomes a problem when you have the 3 stars, and there's this science fiction book out now, which I'm just reading, the 3-body problem, which is interesting.
But it's a novel, or?
It's a novel, a science fiction novel, which is got the Hugo Award. Interesting book. Interesting ideas, but some of it for me doesn't add up, but an interesting, enjoyable read. So how does this come together? So suddenly I saw this brain, and suddenly I realized, oh my God,
maybe the whole entire universe is alive.
Yeah.
And with these findings of what is it, Bohm, who says that when you look at the quantum mechanics, it seems like consciousness creates reality, and actually a lot of young scientists now go after David Bohm and go into that direction because they are stuck elsewhere. And I think there was like 11 experiments you had to do to disprove it, and they were all done, and they all come with the result that
it doesn't disprove.
It seems like maybe we have to change the way we see the world, and that is my agenda. Is why do we not suddenly open our eyes and say, obviously the whole world is different? So coming back to that, so this was my first epiphany. I suddenly realized, oh my God, the whole universe is maybe a living thing. And then the next step was, we have the 0 point energy. So I had this epiphany basically that the universe is alive. And then I suddenly thought, okay, it seems like David Bohm and all that and other now grizzled scientists come out, astrophysicists and quantum scientists, physicists come out after they retired and say, now we can talk. And they suddenly say, well, it seems maybe consciousness is driving the whole thing and not matter.
And I remember very well this moment when you gave me a call and you told me, Konstantin, I have an epiphany.
Yeah.
And I now understand that consciousness is the basis of everything. I remember very well this moment. It was a great, great moment. And getting back the loop to the beginning, it was I asked you about how did this ego thing disappeared, and my thesis is now that if you have this insight into whatever the reality then is, but for you this insight into something much bigger, it makes your ego a little bit more humble, maybe?
More humble.
Something like that?
We get there in a moment.
Okay.
I just quickly, if you don't mind, I want to explain the epiphany, because that was just the start of the first big epiphany.
Yeah.
But there was another thing, because I was into Erich von Däniken, and we can get into that, but maybe we're not so nice in the flow of the one question.
Yeah.
I think there's way more life in the universe than we think. I think it's full of life. And I have other reasons for that, also scientific discoveries which were made, which we can get onto later.
Yeah.
But at the moment, to be in the flow, I suddenly realized, oh my God, there's all this life in the universe. The universe itself might be alive. And with 0 point energy, and now that's why I was getting to that. With 0 point energy, you can be in any place at the universe, and you have access to galactic, cosmic amounts of energy. So let's say if you have a spacecraft, always the problem is you put the fuel in the spacecraft, you have to push it out at the end. How much fuel can you take? Or, okay, now you need nuclear fuel. But when you have 0 point energy, everywhere where I'm in space, it's there. It's surrounding me. It's the same as when you are in a submarine and you go to the Mariana Trench. You're surrounded by this energy. You can drill a hole into the submarine, and then you have this powerful water coming in, and you can use it till you drown in the submarine.
Yeah.
But the problem is, how do we get into it? But we just explained with Stan Meyer and so on, maybe the sluice gate was open.
Yeah.
So I suddenly this epiphany, and then I said, oh my God, the world is constructed in a way that within the shortest amount of time in cosmic time or geological time, this little human discovers electricity, and then only like 80 years later, you had, or 100 years later, you had Maxwell who laid down the mathematics for electromagnetic waves, and then 50 years or 80 years later, whatever, you have suddenly Nikola Tesla, who I think was already opening this up, and then he later died very poor and unacknowledged, and he said, I know there are friends who spoke with him. He was in this hotel where he lived, and he said to people, I've given the humankind all the tools they need, and they don't want them. And he was so depressed, right? And when he died, and apparently his apartment was cleaned out by CIA, FBI, I don't know, but people, that's all rumors again. But the stuff disappeared. I know his son wants stuff back, or his grandson. Anyway, so the idea was, oh my God, within such a short amount of time, we have access to cosmic amount of energy. The whole universe is built that conscious life, which develops, is going out there and is talking to each other. They want us to go out and talk to each other, and whatever happens, the next wonderful thing is going to happen. Some people say maybe some scary stuff and so on, but we can get into that later. For me, it is just events which are supposed to happen, and I was like suddenly, oh my God, the whole thing is done, made. I don't know. Now it gets into God and religion, or I don't know, but it somehow it seems the structure is there to support this. That as soon as consciousness in a very, very fast amount, it's basically so simple. We live in a world we think which is so difficult and complicated, but we have energy, endless amount. When you have endless amount of energy, you can do anything. When we have endless amount of energies and we are not going crazy, we can do anything. And that's what people don't realize. And suddenly I realized, oh my God, there is a meaning. This is much, much grander, much bigger. And that is where you suddenly, and then I suddenly remembered that I was looking at other people, and I looked at the eye and thought, what is behind this? This person got maybe reincarnated, because I thought, how does the world work? And I came to the conclusion reincarnation is the thing which is happening, and we can talk about that as well. There are many, many different ways to arrive at that conclusion. And I said, what is the cosmos behind that person? And I look at little child, and this innocent child, and I started, and then I remember I was driving in my car, and I suddenly was hovering above the car, and I felt taller and bigger.
Yeah.
And so it's a slow process, right? And
beautiful.
That was the first epiphany.
Beautiful.
And then the second epiphany was that I realized that 0 point energy is a good leverage, but people die, people disappear, there's problem with patent, with government, there are legitimate problems. What do you do with so much energy if it goes into the wrong hands? And then I thought, maybe this is not the way of how, because I was thinking for a while, well, we should do a think tank, and I will organize a think tank to think about bring this energy out. And by the way, you touched an interesting thing. You said, okay, why is nobody doing it? Well, what my understanding is from out there is that when you want to deal, for instance, with the United States of America, when you do trade with it, and you want to get good conditions in trade, apparently you have to sign secret documents, secret contracts. And that is where all this is regulated, in these secret contracts. That, for instance, apparently when there's a UFO is crashing, you have to call the Americans to retrieve it, and so on and so on. And when you have these kind of patents filed, you have to lock them away. And that is regulated in secret, but this is again conspiracy.
This is
I
conspiracy,
have nothing confirmed.
And we don't know whether that's true or not.
We don't know.
It's kind of rumors.
It's rumors, it's whistleblowers from former government agents and so on who claim this. There are some people who are in industry and so on who seem to be credible, who say that's the case.
I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, it's so fascinating what you're talking about, and I'm sure there are many people who are very fascinated by these subjects. And there are examples where we see that suddenly more and more credible people start talking about things like UFOs. We have now we had this New York Times title. where they had the sites of these unidentifiable flying objects from these pilots, David Fraser and so on, and they had the sites and they had the measurements by the radars and by the far infrared devices and so on. So this seem to be there are processes going on but still what I think it's so the big question is how do we get, let's say, this woo thing, away from what is serious and what is real. We have, for example, this movie What the Bleep, you might have seen it, and it seems that here some more like woo type of people have somehow misused serious scientists for bringing a strange story up, and it's so sad because there's a true core in that. Yeah. I think that this idea of that consciousness creates reality is a fantastic idea, and especially it has such an very, very, very long tradition. This idea. It goes back to ancient times. We have traditions in spiritual traditions, in ancient Indish traditions, but not also only there, also in other parts of the world. So, and I have a certain kind of trusting humans in a certain level, and I think if humans for such a long time, for so many thousands of years, are following certain ideas, I think there is something we should have a look at. We shouldn't wipe it away.
We cannot just wipe it away.
Yeah,
we cannot, and that is you're hitting the nail.
Yeah,
right on the point. That is, we cannot swipe it away, and that is where also First Nations, or shamans and so on come into play.
Yeah,
correctly.
So okay. Before you start with that, because I think maybe we can turn the talk a little bit now into this direction, because there are these two components of this story. There is a kind of a matter component, is there energy or not, or is there, what is the physics about it, and then there's the other component. It's the consciousness component.
Correct.
And you are somehow pursuing both threats. You are somehow thinking about how could we find out to really reach this 0 point energy if it's there, but on the other side you have this. You got in touch to the First Nations.
Well, exactly.
People, right?
So this is how this happened. I basically was in this deep thinking. I don't want to see the wars anymore, and I suddenly saw the world became so beautiful after this, more beautiful than it is, and I thought, oh my God, what can we do? Because this 0 point energy, it at the moment it's not my thing. I can't do anything. It's too dangerous. Maybe we are not ready for it. And maybe there are good willing people who know and think we are not ready for it. Okay. Yeah. However, we are destroying the earth, so maybe we have to get ready. So I suddenly thought, okay, leave that lever alone, and said, maybe the lever is that we have to change. And when we change, and the more of us change, then maybe we can handle this 0 point energy and the next level of civilization, which I think is the next level. But it is us we have to develop. And that is where this whole thing went into a different direction, because I thought, okay, but that I can do something about that. I can work on myself.
That's good. It's the locus of control.
I have no control over that, and the military, God knows what this powers. Yeah. But I have control over myself and my direct environment of people and so on.
Yeah.
And then I got more interested in this whole consciousness thing and so on, and I researched that, and that's where you and I started talking.
Yeah.
And what then happened is that I saw this beautiful solar eclipse in North America, which was what was it now, 3 years ago or so? I think
Maybe even 5 already.
No. It was maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. I think it was in August. 3 years ago in August, I think it was.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Or was it 2 years ago or 3 years ago? It was a big solar eclipse. And Mexican friend of mine calls me, and I was at that time driving a fire red Ford Mustang convertible, kind of like,
midlife crisis car.
Wonderful. So I couldn't resist. Children are out, kind of grown up and so on. So we drove down to Oregon. That's where we had to go on a long drive, and we knew we would end up in a traffic chaos afterwards. And we looked it up, and we both agreed there is a ridge called Antelope Ridge, and we can stand on the ridge and we get a view, and we are almost in the core shadow. And so we drove there and a whole night, and then we stayed somewhere in some place for a few hours, and then we had to go on and 3 o'clock in the morning, 800 kilometer drive or so, or 850 kilometer drive. And then we were at that ridge, and then we were at that little place where there were a few other people, and there were camping chairs set up and waiting for the event. We were on the rear side of the Cascade volcanic chain. Mm-hmm. And we saw Mount Hood, and so we were on the east side of them, and we saw one of the other one, I forgot now what it's called, something with A, and beautiful cones, they're like really like cone-shaped, beautiful mountains, like drop that beautiful. And we drove through this Columbia Valley, and which has also a very interesting geological past connected to all this, actually, in some ways. I don't know, we probably can't get into this.
Yeah.
We heard on the radio, suddenly somebody had a portable radio, and they said, was BBC, the Astrological Society, Greenwich something, of Royal Astronomical Society, and they said, this event is going to happen now, and the best place now for the weather and all the conditions is a little ridge in Oregon called Antelope Ridge. We looked at each other. We bingo. We did it. And then,
but that's typical for you. You always attract things like that.
I don't know.
Your whole life. It's very interesting.
The bucket list. It's just somehow I have a contract somehow.
Yeah, somehow you have a contract.
And I don't know what contract you have, but I have obviously this contract.
I know my contract, but okay.
Okay. And I'm getting, very lucky. So the moon shadow comes in. We saw the peaks of these volcanoes, these beautiful volcanoes, like peak went dark, and you saw the shadow coming in came from the west, and we were on the east of the peaks. And then the shadow we had a 250 kilometer view, I would say, or 300 kilometer, unbelievable view on that ridge, and looking to Badlands. And that was the place where actually Bhagwan had his center, was just 8 kilometers away, and that's where all the scandals and all the fights happened there. And the shadow of the moon, you could see it moving in, and then we saw that, and then it got cold. And then on the way back, we were trapped in an unbelievable, horrible traffic jam and crazy madness. And I can't get into all the story, but it was a crazy, crazy situation. And just before we left the place, and we get into trouble because we saw all the caravans, like mobile homes coming from another place where there apparently were 50,000 people assembled, and it was the only road out. There are very few roads, and then you have to cross the Columbia River, and so there are only 2 bridges and several hundred kilometers, and so we knew it would be chaos. My son lost his sunglasses. Okay, and it's a long story, but I can't get into it. We had to turn around twice. He first lost that hat, then the sunglasses that disappeared, and then I said, okay, enough, we drive. And then we were driving, and in the evening, it took us the whole day to get even to Seattle. We arrived back in Seattle, that is south of Vancouver, right? Still another 3-hour drive. We arrived there at 11 o'clock at night, coming down over the mountains. We started seeing Seattle, and I started getting hallucinations.
Too tired.
We were like 33 hours on the road and driving, and it was crazy.
Yeah.
And sorry, not that long, but
anyhow, very long.
Very long.
Yeah.
No, not 30 hours, but no, actually 18, 20 hours or something like that. So very long. So I got started getting hallucinations, and I drove down a construction site road and traffic coming towards me with lights. There was a huge traffic jam, and there was Donald Trump in the radio talking about India, and we have to this and that, and very negative, horrible talk. And then I said, dear God, I don't want to kill my beautiful son sleeping next to me. We go into a place to sleep there. I know one. Just let me get there. And so finally we made it there. We slept a few hours. And the next morning we go into the car and drive to...
You had to get up early because you needed to go to office and so on.
Exactly. I had to be... I wanted to be in the office latest at 9:30, kind of a little late, kind of sneaking in. And so it was 6 o'clock in the morning. We drove off, and then I'm driving there. My son, again, was kind of half sleeping, and I suddenly got into this strange level of consciousness. I am recovered. I was very, very clear. And I thought about Donald Trump and all this. And suddenly, I don't know if I should tell that here, but this is kind of a very interesting spiritual experience I started getting to. I just suddenly thought, dear Creator, or whatever you want to call it, right? I said, you did nothing wrong. This world is fantastic. It is beautiful. And there's this horrible Donald Trump talking, and everybody's negative and everybody criticizes. No, the world is great. I love it. It is beautiful. You have done nothing wrong. I love you. And I declared I love. And I think it's what the Indians or gurus say. It's the path of surrender. I surrendered. I surrendered to the universe. And it was really weird. It felt like I was there was like a 3-year-old toddler, little kid running towards me, and I took it in the arm and I gave it a lot of kisses, and I was kissing, I don't know, Creator, I don't know whom I was kissing, or the universe or whatever, or myself, I don't know what it is, it depends on the view. And then I said suddenly, and I was driving 130 or so and at the same time, but I was very clear I could do it somehow. And it's hard to describe the experience, but I said, but I'm so sad because I thought we were very vulnerable. When you see the moon coming in, it got cold. Yeah, you think we are little ants here and we can get squished like this. It was, and with Donald Trump, I started getting negative feelings. But the experience was so beautiful of this solar eclipse. I don't want to feel like that. Yeah. And then suddenly I look in the mirror and I see in the rear mirror of the car, we had the roof closed. Yeah. And we have this little oval window, and in the window, well, the sunglasses of my son, like that, hovering in the slipstream of the car and going up and down. And I looked. And then I looked at Philip.
The sunglasses you were searching 20 hours or 30 hours earlier.
Which were lost 680 kilometers before. Yes. And I wake up Philip and I said, Philip, can you look whether I'm hallucinating? And just look at that. And Philip looked. And we looked at each other, and Philip looked again, and there were these glasses hovering in the slipstream. And then we started laughing. We laughed for 10 minutes, tears coming down, laughing. And that was exactly what I wanted to be happy, right? I didn't want to have this negative. And we laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. And then I managed to get to a parking lot. And then in the parking lot, when we stopped the car, the glasses went onto the trunk, picked them up. And I think they got lost later again.
But anyhow,
glasses are gone.
But it was a kind of moment of deliberation, like, wow.
I have a witness. So whatever, there's probably a completely natural explanation. I think my son took the jacket out of I think the glasses fell into the trunk, and then he took the jacket out in the morning. And by pulling the jacket out of the trunk, probably the glasses fell onto but still they stayed in the slipstream. So it is really weird.
Yeah, it's really weird. And especially the timing, everything coming together, the thoughts you have. And
because when you tell the story, people don't know what the cinema going on in my head, that 3D cinema going on in my head. So, so I think we have a bit of time the way I arranged this now. I think we have another 20 minutes, so we can do this. I think it's okay. We have managed to get the situation under control here. There's a little family situation here, but of course we are traveling and we're trying to do this podcast, right?
Yeah.
So this was that's what this thing. And then a few days later, I go in the internet and I was on consciousness, and then I suddenly see a Lakota elder speak, and he was sitting, I think, in front of the Grand Tetons in Montana or Wyoming. I think, no, Grand Tetons, I think, already in Montana. It's at the border, and he was this beautiful flowers and this beautiful Rocky Mountains, one of the most beautiful formations of the Rocky Mountains in the background. And he picks a flower and he looks into the camera and he says, "Look at this flower. Look at this beauty all around you. How can the Creator be evil? How can you doubt the Creator doesn't love you? Look, this can only be created with unbelievable love. So anything which happens to you, there is a purpose to it. You should trust into Creator." Okay, and then I thought, oh my God, this is beautiful. And I want to know more about First Nations. This is American, we call them First Nations out of respect. American natives, Indiana in German, but you say out of respect, it's First Nations people and or indigenous people. And it was very weird. I went to dinner, a schnitzel dinner. There was a new place, German schnitzel in Vancouver, and I had to try it.
You had to have a look at that.
We had to try. A German Canadian Business Association, I'm a member, said we have a dinner there, and I said, okay, I joined with this dinner, and I sat down. That was 3 weeks later or 2.5 weeks later, and suddenly a guy comes and sits in front of me, and he looks native. And I asked him, you look like you're native. Yeah, he said, I'm half German, half Ojibwe, and I just joined the organization. And I said, oh, wow, I want to know more about the spirituality of First Nations. Then he said to me, oh, you come to the right guy. I'm the keeper of the sacred fire of the sun dancers in this area. And the sun dancers is probably the highest level of spirituality, one of the highest, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but it's a very high level of spirituality. And the sun dance is sacred to the... and I have to be very careful I don't say anything wrong, and please apologize up front to anybody. Nobody is offended that if I get something wrong, but it is the Lakota and Dakota, or which we call the Sioux, but it's the true name is Lakota and Dakota, and they have Sundance. I think the Shan have a form of Sundance and somebody else, and it's a dance where people tie themselves to a tree, and you can hold the string, or you can even tie yourself, and then even the hardcore is you tie through the flesh. And
like
there
a piercing thing.
There are
like
different
that.
rites. I think the Dakota is the buffalo, and then the Cheyenne have something else. And they were doing apparently the Lakota or the Lakota have the buffalo rite, I think, and they have allowed, because they're so worried about Mother Earth. About our Earth, that they say if we approve somebody, he can perform this sun dance, and if everybody taking part follows the rules, then the elders will approve it, and so there was obviously a group in West Vancouver where I live, or North Vancouver. There were some people who had this right to do this sun dance, and so. And he said to me, you have to go for a sweat lodge. Oh. So I had no idea what sweat lodge is. Well, I had a vague idea. I knew it was the hot stones and so on, but I had no clue. So the Sundance chief was stationed, was in the army, an officer, or I think sergeant or officer, and he was stationed in Germany, so he knew German, so that was also good. And then, so this guy I met in the German Canadian Business Association, Robert, also his name Robert, he said to me, you have to bring tobacco. Okay, so not much explanation you have to do. You go along with doing so, tobacco, and you have to give it to the Sundance chief, whose name is also Robert Nahani at that time. And so there was a Sunday morning. We went early because we had to make the fire, and the stones have to be in there 3.5 hours, and then in the afternoon, I think 1 o'clock or so, the others came. And I went to Robert Nahani and gave him the tobacco, and that means I want to have teachings from him. And he said, no, why are you giving me that? I don't want this. And then I didn't know what to say, and then I said, would you accept that as a gift in exchange for teaching? I want to learn from you. I want to learn the path from you. And then he said, that's what I want to hear. I can accept this.
Okay.
Okay. And then I it gets so long. I learned that was before how the fire is made and so on. And then we go in, and that was a mixed one. And the ladies wear these cotton dresses, and the men go in there in a swimming trunk, and the rituals are sacred, and you can't take pictures. So I cannot tell too much, but it is pitch dark, and they heat the lava rocks up in the fire, and I was told when you decide to go here, your ancestors go into the lava rocks. They are with you, and that is why there's a door, and you can't go. You shouldn't step over the line between the fire and the door and so on, because the ancestors come in from that side. And then we filed in, and then you sit in the pitch dark, and they make it really hot. I mean, they make it so hot that this first one, there were also others, newcomers in there, and it was a mixed First Nations, a mixed other Canadians, and from some Greek and so on. And you have to surrender. Again, you have to
the
give
heat
up.
and to the situation,
You
to
have
the
to
darkness.
surrender to the universe.
It's narrow, it's hot, and there's no way out.
I have been in spiritual. You were in there, you can't get out. I mean, if it gets too hot, you say, all my relations open the door, and then they will open the door. But I mean, it's just.
Okay.
And you haven't made it then, right? Nobody. Everybody says you gave what you could and so on. So it's no bad feelings, but still. And you sit in there, but still, you have to get out first, when you panic. So you have to. But I was at the first lodge. First of all, he didn't make it too hot, and I was so happy. I couldn't believe it. I was sitting with tattooed First Nations people, teachings in a sweat lodge. Me as the Bavarian coming from there, what the hell am I doing here, right? And I loved it. And they had drums. They have drums in there. They were singing, and I really saw things, which I saw, little balls of light, which were like the same light as bioluminescence, and they came out. Of the stones and went into the mouth of the singer.
Wow!
And then suddenly the drums lit up, and it's pitch dark in there. They make it pitch dark. You just see the glowing stones if they still glow strong enough. Pitch dark, and then suddenly I see the drums lighting up, and it's like when you throw a stone into the water, and it makes these concentric rings spreading out. And they were each drum beat, and it was the same, this bioluminescent, the yellow color. And I was just looking there and like, oh wow, and it changes you. It changed me. So this was the education of the soul and body.
And this was just the beginning of this journey, I guess. So and you are in the middle of this journey, and maybe looking at the time, I think we have to make a second, at least a second and a third podcast.
We might have to, but we have I think 20 minutes. I think we can do.
It's still 20 minutes.
Well,
okay,
it's 7, and we said we are. Oh well. Can you come with me in the car?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Then it's good. If
okay,
you can
so
come
20
with me,
minutes
then we can squeeze the maximum out of it without getting into too much. I'm already in trouble, but we'll get into not any more
but
trouble.
This year is really, this is important what you're doing here. But just, I think it's like the beginning of the journey, and I know you have made many more experiences, but not only these experiences. It's so fascinating because, we have talked before the podcast. We've briefly talked about, for example, Graham Hancock.
Yes,
I know he's also somebody who is disputed a lot. But I personally love these books, and because he's also a person who is somehow connecting dots in a different way than others are doing that, especially as scientists very often are somehow digging in their tunnel and they don't see what's around them.
Yes, And he was part of that. What awakened me was also Graham Hancock. I read him,
and he has this thesis that there is a kind of an ancient culture that was before all these cultures we know, and now this latest book, America Before, is fascinating, and he talks here about this cataclysm that took apparently happened 12,800 years before, and he also has the thesis that these, let's say, psychedelic drugs or all these types of experiences are part of a very old culture.
Yes.
And you find it everywhere, not only in America. You had it in Greek.
Yes.
The
Elysium.
The Elysium. It was like 2,000 years long. It was a very long thing.
Here in Bavaria, they made the beer with magic mushrooms, and that's why later some people mixture wrong or too extreme or whatever, they put in also other hallucinogenic stuff, and then it went out of course, sometimes you got a bad brew where people went crazy or died or whatever, and that's why the purity law was then
really.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yes. So it had also another background. Of course, the church didn't like this people going off on drugs and experiencing stuff which was out of their control. So there's a lot of factors playing in.
And so, but in looking at the time, let's try to get the turn. So the one side is these experiences, and I would love to have another podcast with you and talking about all these experiences. I have also my experiences, not specifically with drugs, but just with things I experienced in my life. But let's put it for this last still 20 minutes we have to this mission you have, because I think this is such an important thing.
Yeah.
What developed you with this?
I think we have to do two podcasts.
Okay.
One about the experiences and one about I want to explain why I think there's much more life in the universe than people think.
Great.
But this is going too far now. So coming to the mission. This is interesting. So basically, through later, I got this Robert who introduced me had some stuff he left at in the interior about 300 kilometers away. There's a legendary chief, Darrell Bob.
Yeah,
a chief of the he's Statlimp nation, and Kaklip is Kaklip. Sometimes pronounced differently, is his
tribe,
his village or his band.
Okay, Darrell Bob,
and so he had left some stuff, and it was spring, and that was about 2 years ago, spring, and I had the car, the nice car I talked about. Nice. A reason to drive it. I drive you up. We take the roof down and we drive over the mountains. Beautiful road, towards Whistler, and then over the mountains over the mountain chain, canyon, and beautiful pass. And then we go to Darrell Bob. It's about 4.5 hour drive. We arrived at the house. He goes in, and this is in the Fountain Valley, and that is the place where the Sundance happened. So Darrell Bob is his farm is the ground of the Sundance. It was sacred. The whole valley is sacred. It's called Fountain Valley. There's a creek running through with little springs all over, fountains, springs, and then there's a mountain ridge where, since thousands of years, they were going up to have visions, and the visions would tell the people what to do in the future. So, and people go for vision quests there. So that's where they decided to make the Sundances. Those Sundances were approved, and it's on Darrell Bob's land. So we go to the sacred place. So we stop at the farm. I stay in the car because I was not invited, and he picked up stuff. So he goes up the steps to the house, and then suddenly after a few minutes he comes out and waves me.
Yeah.
And so I have to come in. Apparently he was told, why are you letting this guy sit in the car? So I go in, and there I see Darrell Bob, legendary Darrell Bob, his wife, Darrell Bob in a lazy boy, in an old run-down lazy boy chair. You know, these reclining chairs, you which they have in America, and I think in Germany you have them as well. And then there was a tiny, like a place which you couldn't call a sofa, but where Robert sat and I sat there and sit down, and I look at the two of them, and it was a moment where you think the earth is shifting. I suddenly knew I was exactly at the right point in my life, at the right place, at least in that timeline I was traveling down. That was weird. It was like weird. So Daryl Bob sorted out Robert, and there was some issue, and because why he left the stuff there was a long story behind it, but he got sorted out and was very emotional. And then Daryl turns at me, and I thought, oh, something's going to happen today. I just this feeling. And then he said to me, and who are you? Can you tell me who you are? And so on, very nicely. But not like that. He said it nicer, but kind of, that was the vibe. Like,
but he was an authority.
Like, you're
somehow,
welcome, but who are you? Just please explain yourself. And I said to him, I'm an architect, and I'm originally from Munich, in Germany, and I just drove Robert up here because he left the stuff. Then there was silent, and then Daryl looks at his wife, very, very very, very. They are so dear to me, the two of them now. Very emotional moment for me because they're so dear to me. So he looks at his wife, and look at each other, and then Daryl looks at me again. He said, 2 weeks prior we had a pipe ceremony. And we were praying for an architect to be sent from Vancouver up here.
Again, such a moment.
And there I came in, right? Oh, interesting. So, well, you can interpret it in many ways. Maybe he's very clever and he wanted to rope me in. I don't know. But apparently, I don't see a reason why he would make a story, right? So I trust him. I trust him with my life and my children. So he takes me out and explains to me that they have to build a healing house for Mother Earth, because Mother Earth is in bad shape. He wants a healing house, but that will be a house where the elders will speak and teach the old lost knowledge, because he told me, I'm the keeper of the lost knowledge, and the knowledge gets lost. And we have to preserve it and all that. And then I find out he is part of the Bridge Walkers. That is a movement of indigenous people from different parts of the world which are trying to walk the canyon between us crazy Westerners, left brain, half crazed people, and they try to walk the bridge and bring us back to the side of sanity in their eyes, right? On which I think now maybe the side of being in balance with nature and all that stuff, and understanding that we are part of nature. So they walk the bridge across that chasm and trying to take us by the hand one by one and get us over. That group is called Bridgewaters, and I find out there was a movie made about it, and there's a beautiful film called Bridgewalkers, and now I can't find the name of the lady who made it in my head, but
we will put it into the text.
We'll put it in there, and very nice lady, and so and this healing house I was supposed to design, and then I just and then suddenly they invited us for dinner. So it was a long thing. So we stayed for dinner, and so it was an interesting experience. Stayed for dinner, and I pulled some tobacco out, and I gave him some tobacco to Daryl Bob, because I thought this is a moment. I think I had ready for them.
Okay,
yes,
you were
I gave
already
him some tobacco
prepared somehow
on the dinner. Yeah, and then he suddenly says to his wife, we have to work on Christian. Okay, what? Okay, I got the works. So I get downstairs into the ceremonial room, and there were all kinds of buffalo heads and furs and all kinds of stuff. And they gave me a full cleansing, and it's really interesting. Teresa Fenton-Bob, Daryl's wife, she comes with a feather, and and she pulls the spirits off you. And they do that when they have gatherings and meetings, because they don't want anybody to have something attached to them. And she doesn't touch you. And you stand there, and it feels like somebody pulling spider webs off. And so now we have the last 10 minutes. So I have to explain that. So this whole thing, I was suddenly in the middle there, and then I started already designing in my head, and I thought I'd do this building for them, but then I suddenly realized I'm not supposed to show them anything, because Daryl suddenly says we have to go to Turtle Lodge and in Winnipeg, and he paid 4 flights of us. There was me and Daryl and his wife and another Christian, young Christian, also an American guy. Is he American, or maybe I'm saying something wrong, or is he from Alberta? Okay, I'm getting mixed up here now. But young Christian, anyway, he was also helping Daryl, and very nice guy. And we flew to Winnipeg, to Turtle Lodge. Turtle Island, they call North America Turtle Island because it looks like a turtle. And the Lake Winnipeg is in the middle of it. And Turtle Lodge is David Korshin, and David Korshin had a vision. He was a successful businessman and had a good life and whatever he was doing. And he had visions from a turtle spirit coming to him, which represents Mother Earth. And I don't want to tell all the details because it's not my place to tell, but there are videos about him, and you can listen to what Dave Koshina has to tell. But it rattled him so enormously that he gave up everything, and the vision was this knowledge has to be come out, has to be preserved, a community has to heal, and it has to be shared with everybody in the world. So we are at that point where where these ancient prophecies seem to start coming to place. But again, I'm overstepping myself, as we don't know, we can't assume that. So we cannot say that is the case, but we don't know whether or not, or nothing, nobody knows anything. And it's disrespectful to assume anything. So we don't assume nothing. But we have to start looking at the signs. That's kind of the message, kind of what I got. Mm-hmm. So they're looking, and I told them a funny story. Whilst we were there, they have an incredible, they managed to, there was a part of the hospital on the reservation was rebuilt, and they managed to get in a center for native medicine and healing. And it's so successful that the leader, or one of the doctors who makes the connection to the First Nations, she got awards now, and it's very successful. And well, anyway, we had breakfast, and I told them that there's this sacred mountain in Bavaria, which the Dalai Lama thinks is sacred, which is the Untersberg at Berchtesgaden, and there's a time phenomenon, and there's this beautiful water of the Königssee, Lake of the Kings, and suddenly they said, oh, maybe we should do a pilgrimage and take some of the water and heal Lake Winnipeg. And so this was an interesting discussion we had. And I don't know if people know about the Untersberg, but there is some time phenomenon alleged, and there are some people investigating it. It's a very interesting story. Now, I told them maybe there's an old story that something comes out of the Untersberg when the world is in trouble, and maybe it's the water. And because of the research of the mysteries of water, and that we now discover that water stores memory and so on. So I thought maybe this had something to do with it. And I drank this water because it's the seed of our ancestors, is Berchtesgaden, right? And then with the mother milk. And they find now that any water you drink as a child, it always, that structure of water stays in you. So I told them this story. Then suddenly, a few months later, they said, okay, I presented the design for the healing house, but it was too ambitious, and they are a little scared at the moment to do it because, and they said, okay, first we do it a smaller one ourselves. And then Daryl said to me, but you know what? You have another task. You're not the architect. You have to make a connection to Europe for me. And this was triggered because I told him I had several dreams of we have to bring people together and network. and very strange dreams, and we can't get into that. Maybe it's part of the experience.
Yeah.
But I had some dreams, and he suddenly said, "Oh my God, you know what happened in the last few months? At COVID, we were in a COVID lockdown, right? That was last year, full COVID lockdown." And he said, "We just were able to get to Lake Winnipeg in the January 2020, and then the lockdown came, and." Then I was working from home, and I had these strange dreams, and I called Daryl, and then he told me the whole story. And he said, Daryl said to me, "You know, you're not going to be the architect. Please don't be upset. You're going to be my connection to Europe, because the elders apparently I triggered something with my story."
You
about
triggered something
it seems I triggered something.
Yeah. So just to get it together, at this Turtle Lodge, you were sitting with really important elders of these American First Nation people.
Yes. Some these are the Daryl Bob and Dave Korshin, especially Dave Korshin, is part of a group which is some of the most important spiritual leaders of North America. Some of them, and there are many others, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but they are very revered. There's, for instance, Avril Lookinghorse, who's he holds the white buffalo calf bundle. He's befriended with them, and so apparently there was some meeting.
Okay.
And now they are thinking that they want to bring together the shamans from all over the world into a cycle of, I understood it's 8 meetings, but over 8 years gatherings, and the whole thing changes. And again, I hope I don't get into trouble when I say that, because they always say, "Christian, stop thinking like a businessman. You have to think with the heart."
I think this is an
it
important
changes
point.
as it has to.
So I think this is very important to make this point. You once explained it very well to me, that if you look at this way of developing projects like these people are doing it, it is not the typical Western way where you set a goal and you find your way towards that goal and you just push the obstacles aside to try to really reach your goal. Yeah. It's very different. It's more like you start a journey and you have to read the signs of things what are happening and coming along on this way.
It is,
and this is shaping the whole journey finally.
Exactly.
Right?
It is lived quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
That is the weird thing. They live quantum mechanics, which makes me believe that they carry some knowledge which comes, Graham Hancock, from a former civilization, and it was quite untouched. I think it is the Hopi where it's the most untouched, because they lived on that plateau. Yeah, it's quantum mechanics. They live.
And now
because if we assume now it's the prophecy or whatever, right?
Yeah.
The big then we are jinxing it, because we start influencing it, because we live in a quantum mechanic world. So we cannot. That's why they don't want to make decisions easily. They take a long time with decisions, because they want to watch the whole time.
Yeah.
Every move they do,
read the signs,
changes the environment again.
And it's like it's like an interactive thing.
Yeah.
The way you are perceiving it,
it's
is the way how it's shaping it.
Exactly.
And now just let's take this last final 2, 3, 4 minutes. What is your specific mission now? What will be the next things you try to?
At the moment, the biggest thing is they need to heal, because they have a drug problem. So they use this leverage they get with the government, because it goes so well in Lake Winnipeg. They are now trying to get people who went onto the black road or the dark road, they say it, when they get into drugs. Huge problem, because their entire, it's another discussion, the entire culture was destroyed, and we have now all these horrors which get discovered in Canada. And anyway, they find now, when they bring people back into the spiritual world and into the old customs, that it gives them identity, and it's very healing, and they have very high success rate of getting off drugs. And so we are building now the Western sister lodge of Turtle Lodge. That is what this is going to become now.
This is the idea.
Yeah, and that's the Wheel of Life Society. But the larger picture is, and that's what I want to say, the larger picture is the preservation of the old knowledge of the indigenous people. So that will be the North American prairie or North American First Nations preservation program, where they have these lodges at different places, and a lodge is like a community or church community, you can say, and where the elders get fed, and which are still alive and carry the knowledge, and they can teach the knowledge to whoever wants. But it has to be open to the whole world now, to everybody, because the knowledge has to come out. So that is what Turtle Spirit said. That is what the time apparently is now.
Yeah.
It has to come, and if we can change enough our consciousness and take this to heart, we can maybe turn around this whole situation with the planet. That's the whole thing. But the knowledge the first step is healing, then the knowledge has to be preserved. So there has to be a whole chain, and that has to happen everywhere in the world. And there are, and I can't talk about it, but there are efforts made from other ends for that to happen, also in Japan and in other places, where this old knowledge of the indigenous people gets taught, and there are facilities there, and where the elders get honored and fed, and exactly where we are not taking that knowledge and shove it into the trash bin, which is so precious, this knowledge, because we start realizing we live in a quantum reality, and that is lived quantum reality. So this knowledge now has gone through all this evolution, and it has to come back together. That is what has to happen, and that's what they feel. And this seemed to be the moment where we have to start testing it. At least we have to preserve it for sure.
Yeah.
And so that is the idea. So we can put this website, Wheel of Life Society. That's a society which Darryl Bob created.
Yeah.
I'm so busy with my architecture that at the moment I can't be so much involved, but we can put it on there if people want.
Let's do that. People can have a look at that and
to look at that or
be
help,
inspired.
Be inspired, and yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Great, Christian. It was a fantastic experience already, and we have to go on with that. Now the time is over. We have to stop now.
We have to stop now. I think we are 3 minutes over before we get into deep trouble. We better go.
And see the family, and thank you very much. Let's go on. The next one will be then obviously online. I did this before; it works well, so we continue this online. And so, thank you very much.
I'll get a better microphone or something, whatever
at
you
home,
will tell me, and then we can do it online.
Okay. Sure. And you at home, have a great time. Ja, liebe Freunde zu Hause, wenn euch dieser Podcast gefällt, dann könnt ihr ihn natürlich unterstützen. Es gibt ein paar ganz einfache Dinge: liken, abonnieren, den Alarm drücken für das Abo, oder ihr geht auf unsere Patreon-Seite, die ihr unten findet im Fußtext. Dort könnt ihr uns natürlich auch finanziell unterstützen. Danke euch.